Almost a year ago, I made 2 ultimate guides to Warlock in D&D 5e. Now I'm gonna make another one, but with subclasses. And we're gonna put them in a tier list. Welcome to Pack Tactics, where the best patron is me, in fact. You can get your first subclass feature, Pack Tactics, by going to patreon.com/packtactics. It's a really good feature, it gives you advantage. Anyway, seriously, we gotta start. For this tier list, I'll consider builds that are predominantly built around the subclass. So that means no 1 or 2 level dips. Well, at least for the most part. If I were to consider multiclassing like that, then the tier list would be a bit different. Another thing is, earlier levels are generally considered more influential to the strength of a subclass than later levels. You spend more time at lower levels. For those watching in the far future, you might notice that this video was made in 2024. This does not include the 2024 books. It's not out yet. Anyways, there aren't that many subclasses, so I'm gonna keep the rating like this. Also, I'll be doing this alphabetically. Let's just begin. First up, Archfey. Immediately, I need to give a disclaimer. The Archfey gets a really good expanded spell list. First, let's talk about plant growth, the craziest one. Let me read it quickly for you. If you cast a spell using 1 action, choose a point within range. All normal plants in a 100-foot radius centered on that point becomes thick and overgrown. A creature moving through the area must spend 4 feet of movement for every 1 foot it moves. So not only is this massive, like, oh my god, but the spell says you are slowed while in the area, not while moving through the plants. This seriously puts plant growth in Force Cage level of tier. And that's a 7th level spell. Plant growth is a 3rd level spell. Now, to be fair, most people don't run it this way. I don't run it this way either. Most DMs say when you move through the plants, you are slowed. The reason why I point this out is because I have to work with raw as much as possible. I can't guess your DM. But in this case, I'm gonna assume your DM is gonna rule it differently. And that changes the rating of this subclass. Another crazy spell is Sleep, and this is on a Warlock. You get that back on a short rest. So if you play exclusively in tier 1 or you play in a one-shot, this is amazing. This can be one of the best 1st to 3rd level builds in the entire game. Your job is just to spam Sleep, and you get everything back on a short rest. Another fantastic spell is at the end. You get Seeming, and with Seeming you can do a bunch of things. But anyways, we gotta keep on moving. The bad news about this subclass is it doesn't have good features. Yes, spells are features, but you know what I mean. Features. Their Fey Presence feature has a hilariously small AoE. Misty Escape opens up to being attacked more, and doesn't even undo the damage that triggers the reaction. Beguiling Defenses turns around charmed effects, but more than 60% of enemies that inflict the charmed condition through their traits, actions, spells, lair actions, or regional effects are actually immune to the charmed condition. Even then, the charmed condition doesn't do a whole lot except for defending just you. And finally, Dark Delirium, in its best case, is a temporary banish. It's not amazing. So therefore, I rate Archfey as C tier. Next is Celestial. If you don't value short rest sleep from Archfey as much as I do, then you would rate Celestial higher than Archfey. However, I do like short rest sleep. So I'm putting Celestial in D tier. The things they get are not great. The highlights of their expanded spell list are Revivify, Guardian of Faith, Wall of Fire, and Greater Restoration. That's it. The bonus cantrips are, well, they're okay, but I don't really care for cantrips. Healing Light is a nice way to bring up unconscious allies, which makes it quite decent. Radiant Soul is not so commonly useful damage resistance with a meh damage increase. Celestial Resilience is basically Inspiring Leader, but only after at least 9 other levels. There are way better ways to generate temporary HP. Like, what are you doing? And finally, Searing Vengeance is basically a long rest Death Ward at level 14. I would much rather play Archfey. It has more uses. If I'm playing exclusively in tier 1, then I would consider Archfey. Looking at Celestial, I can't think of a single reason why I would play this. Next, Fathomless, also known as the Situational Warlock subclass. Guess what I'm gonna rank it? I actually think it's one of the best subclasses for Warlocks. I made a video about it, link in the description. Their expanded spell list isn't amazing, but Thunderwave, Sleet Storm, Big B's Hand, and situationally, Control Water are really good. As for their features, some of them are seen as situational, which makes the subclass worse. This is wrong. Power is power. The features that aren't situational more than make up for the ones that won't come up that often. This subclass goes to S tier. Right at level 1, they get Tentacles of the Deep, and that remains incredible throughout your entire progression. It's a tentacle that whacks a creature to slow them down and does damage. It lasts for 10 rounds, and you can use it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. The incredible thing that makes this insanely powerful is actually the slow part, because it can easily be stacked with other movement control abilities. Like for example, Repelling Blast. Push them back, slow them down. Lance of Lethargy. Oh, somebody casts Ray of Frost. Or somebody casts Plant Growth, for example. Maybe you cast Sleet Storm. You make it so that enemies can't actually reach you or your friends, which is great defense. Gift of the Sea is not incredible, but it can be very useful in the right circumstances, as I explained in my swimming video. Oceanic Soul is more survivability, together with some minor fluff. Guardian Coil, again, adds more damage mitigation. This works out quite well if you're not using your reaction very much. Grasping Tentacles is a non-concentration black tentacles, with the extra benefit of free temporary HP. Again, fantastic feature. Really good control. And finally, Fathomless Plunge, which is, well, it's not that great. Anyways, absolutely amazing subclass. I hope you can fathom it. Next, and this is a classic, Fiend. Kobold! This is my favorite! It has Fireball! Yes, their expanded spell list is great. They have Command, Fireball, and Wall of Fire. And for some builds, Fire Shield is pretty good. And their features is quite respectable, so I would put this in A tier. Dark One's Blessing is a way for the Fiend Warlock to replenish their temporary HP throughout a fight. You can also use Bag of Rats with this. Dark One's Own Luck is fantastic for defense. It can be used for counterspell checks or even initiative if needed. Fiendish Resilience is another great way to shore up those defenses that cannot consistently be helped by something like Absorb Elements. And with how common force damage is nowadays, this has become a bigger highlight. It's actually really rare to get resistance to force damage. And finally, Hurl Through Hell, a once per long rest single target short-term banishment with some nice damage on top. And that is without any saving throw. It's really good. I really like this subclass. It's a classic from 2014. It's a classic from Baldur's Gate 3. Solid subclass. Before we continue, this video is sponsored by Chipeko, where you can get over 4,000 maps just like that. And better yet, your catalog of maps just keeps on growing after time. They've got battle maps, dungeon maps, and even maps that varies from seasons, day and night, weather effects, and much more. Some of these maps are fully animated too. These guys are map experts. Nobody can beat these guys when it comes to maps. You really don't need to describe very much because everything's on the screen. It's like Baldur's Gate gameplay at that point, but with tabletop freedom, which is the best gaming experience ever. I highly recommend checking out Chipeko on Patreon. You get an insane amount of maps instantly. And you even get access to their Discord, so if you're having a hard time with these maps on VTTs, you can just ask the map experts or the community for help. This makes DMing incredibly easy. Very optimal. Back to the video. And now we get into the subclass that got me the most hate out of everything I've made. It's Genie Warlock. Genie Warlock is great. The reason why I got so much hate is because I read out this part. The vessel is a tiny object. You decide what the object is. So that means, I picked the Ring of Three Wishes. When I made that short, I thought, it's obviously not intended. It's just funny to point out. But people took it super seriously, like, oh my god. So let me make it clear. I am not assuming you are picking the Ring of Three Wishes at level 1. This is not intended, DMs are not going to allow this, and I'm not going to consider it in the tier list. Anyways, this subclass interestingly has 4 different combinations of expanded spell lists you can choose. Depending on which type of genie you go with, any of the genie warlock options get useful spells such as Phantasmal Force and Wish. Dao gets great options like Sanctuary, Spike Growth, and Wall of Stone. Genie gets Thunderwave and Seeming. Marid is kinda similar to Fathomless. It gets Fog Cloud, Sleet Storm, and Control Water. Basically, any option here gets great spells, with Genie maybe getting the short end of the stick. Besides great spells, this subclass gets fantastic features. I am obviously putting this in S tier, but I have to say, this is very neck and neck with Fathomless. However, I rank Fathomless slightly higher. Fathomless is so insanely good because of the slowing, and it's so insanely easy to combo with. But if you play in a party that doesn't take advantage of control that much, then I would say Genie is better. Anyways, their features are for the most part influenced by the type of Genie you pick. Genie's Vessel, which I talked about not too long ago, includes a damage bonus based on the Genie, and a personal demiplane which can be used for a lot of tech. We're not going to talk about that. Elemental Gift provides a Genie-specific damage resistance, which is great. And you also get Flight for 10 minutes. It's proficiency bonus number of times per day. Super good. You can default kill with it. It lasts for a very long time. Great for dungeons. Well, that's if the dungeon has a tall ceiling. Sanctuary Vessel gives you a once per shorter short rest. And it works with your party, which is pretty nice. You can also transport your entire party via something like a familiar. And finally, at level 14, you get Limited Wish, a toned down wish spell with plenty of great options like Wall of Force, Anti-Life Shell, Heal, Greater Restoration, and more. Next, the great old one, Cthulhu Fhtagn. This subclass has some of the worst features known to mankind. And that also applies to the Lovecraftian beings. However, their expanded spell list is actually respectable, making the subclass not completely useless. Dissonant Whispers, Hideous Laughter, Phantasmal Force, Sending, Black Tentacles, and Telekinesis are all solid additions to the Warlock list. This subclass is going right to D. It's worse than the Celestial. Awakened Mind is a short-range, sight-based, one-way telepathy. It's not like the Baldur's Gate 3 tadpole thing. It's so lame. Entropic Ward is a once per short rest reaction that might or might not stop an attack from happening. It's not useless, but it's definitely not as useful as many other similar features found across Warlock subclasses. And they have like multiple uses. To be fair, the proficiency number of times usage is like a new thing. Thought Shield is a highly similar feature, and around 1 out of 5 creatures that deal psychic damage are immune to it. And finally, Create Thrall. I've honestly overrated this feature in the past. It's really because I didn't read the feature properly. I just read Create Thrall and I was like, oh, it's good. It charms an incapacitated creature. You know the big thing that the charm condition helps with? Enemies that are attacking you. You know what incapacitated creatures aren't busy doing? Attacking you. So, it's completely useless. What a joke. Next, and this is from Xanathars. This is an optimizer classic. Hexblade Warlock. Hexblade is incredible for dipping, 1 or 2 levels. But other than that, it's not as strong as you think. Their expanded spell list, even its strongest options like Shield and Wrathful Smite, are not as useful for a character that consists of mostly Warlock levels, due to the way their spell slots work. While, to be fair, Shield can come in some use if scribing scrolls is a common option. By the way, yes, as a Warlock you should always try to scribe scrolls. That means you have more resources. That's really important for you. Anyways, their features are for the most part duds, but I'm gonna put them in B tier over Archfey. Hexblade's Curse in a non-dip scenario is not much of a damage increase, but it's nice to have. You get it back on a short rest. It's a separate resource from spell slots. I really like when the game hands me stuff like this. I usually rate them really high. Hex Warrior is really the thing that makes Hexblade magical. Proficiency in medium armor and shields right at level 1. This is the main reason people want get the Hexblade dip, just because of this. Well, there's also the weapons, attack, and damage can use Charisma part 2, but that's more for gishing purposes for the most part. Don't get me wrong, like, you can make that really powerful, but the main reason why optimizers want this is because of the proficiency. Accursed Spectre is an extra body on the field, while sometimes it's not very impactful. Armor of Hexes allows you to evade an attack with a 50% effectiveness as a reaction. This is some damage mitigation, but it's nothing impressive. I want to see more. And finally, Master of Hexes. This allows you to use your Hexblade's curse more frequently. For level 14, this is a meme feature. Next up, and this one's really interesting, Undead. Undead is basically a new version of Undying. This subclass has some incredibly strong expanded spells like Phantasmal Force, Phantom Steed, Death Ward, and Anti-Life Shell. Also, their features are incredible too, especially Form of Dread. It's fantastic. It stays useful throughout your whole progression. Kobold! Is that a reference to Form of Dread blog? No, but that blog is great. Shoutouts to Hane. Anyways, I put this subclass at S tier. It's behind Fathomless and Genie. Its shtick is kinda similar to Fathomless, but I honestly believe stacking speed reduction is insanely strong. I believe it's stronger than Form of Dread. At level 6, the Undead Warlock gets Grave Touched. It's a minor damage boost, nothing too special. Then there's Necrotic Husk, a damage mitigation as well as a semi-death ward. It's a nice defensive feature. And finally, Spirit Projection is a way for them to increase their defense again, but with a flying speed. With some tech, it's a lot stronger, but let's not consider that. Last and definitely the least, Undying Warlock. This subclass is terrible. For the most part, their expanded spell list is awful. The only unique thing it had was Death Ward, but then Undead Warlock came out, so it's completely irrelevant now. This has nothing unique anymore. I mean, I guess there's maybe legend lore, but who am I kidding? As for their features, again, awful. This subclass is the worst subclass. It's going straight to D tier. Among the Dead is almost useless, as the end condition for their defenses is casting an offensive spell against the enemy in question, with the valid enemies only being undead. Defy Death is a once per long rest healing word-esque feature. Wow, incredible. At level 6, Undying Nature is just fluff. It's a dead feature. And finally, Indestructible Life is like an evolution of Fighter's Second Wind, but backwards. This subclass is so bad, I was actually considering not even putting it in the tier list. I'm not even joking. And there we go, that's the tier list. This video turned out longer than I expected it to be. Anyways, I'm getting sleepy. End of video. If you like this video and want to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye!